This is a quick introduction to the WordPress admin area. This is something for people that are new to WordPress can be a little bit confusing if they're not familiar with any of these links, the menu names. So like I say, this is just a very quick introduction. The first thing you usually land on when you come into the admin area is the dashboard. And this is where it will have some little widgets here that maybe show you little things about site stats, any updates. As you can see, there's an update link even there under dashboard. And like I say, if these start to irritate you, you can often dismiss them like that. Underneath the dashboard, you've got posts. Now, people who are new to WordPress sometimes don't always understand where to find their blog, and a blog is full of posts. So when you go into the admin area, whenever you want to add anything to your blog, then what you need to do is look into posts, and there you can see all your posts, all your blog entries. Usually it'll just say sample post here when you first set up a new WordPress account. You can add a new post, and you can have a look at your categories and add new categories. So usually the default one is uncategorized, but you can add in new categories here, like, I don't know, latest news or whatever you want really. There's also tags which are kind of related to categories in the sense it's something that you can sort all your posts by adding tags to them. But they can usually be a little bit woollier than a category. So a category might be a large area, but you might have certain posts which all say you have a site about food, and you might have certain foods which all go into the vegetable department, so you might want to tag them all, those ones with all vegetable. So something like that. But you can read more about tags by searching online. Media is your media, basically your media library. This is where all your photos, all your images, everything that's related to media, PDFs, images, videos, it all goes in here. And you can refer back to the media library when you're actually in things like posts and pages, because you'll note, I'll show you that in a moment, but there is actually a little tab there that's called Add Media, and it will take you to your media library where you can drag things that you've already stored here. So technically, if you've got some images that you know you want to put on your site at one point, but you might not be ready yet, you could still throw them all into your media library and then access them later on from a page or a post to add that image. And you can sort these, as you can see, by things like date, images, audio, video, blah, blah, blah. Underneath that, you have pages. So the difference between pages and posts are basically everything that will go into your blog area. Pages are actual pages on the site. So if you've got like a contact page, your home page, even your blog page, which you can assign then your blog post to appear on, as you can see here. And that's something that you set through settings, which I'll show you in a moment. Underneath pages, you've got comments, because you can actually enable comments on things like posts and pages. You can see allow comments, and you can get it to allow comments by default in your settings, or you can disable that. You will find with your comments you probably get a lot of spam through this, so you need to keep an eye on that, and that's the reason why you might sometimes want to disable comments on things that really don't need them, because you might just get a load of rubbish come through that it just becomes quite irritating. You have to keep deleting them out. Appearance is everything to do with like the actual appearance of your site, where your themes are stored, your widgets, you can access from here, your menus, so your header, background, editor, all these various things that you could easily spend ages going through all these. But the main ones you'll use is probably your widgets and menus once you've got your site set up, because your theme, obviously, once you've installed your theme, you don't want to be changing your theme too often. So widgets are things like little widgets that can go into spots on your sidebar. You can often have a footer widget, depending on your theme. And there's various widgets you can drop into the areas that are pre-set up for your site. Like I say, content bottom here, content bottom one, sidebar. Yours will be different, most likely, but you can drop from these to these, and you can probably check at the front of your site to see exactly where they're appearing. Your menus, you can make custom menus, which you can then actually drop in. Actually, I've got one here which is invalid because obviously I've removed that page. But your menu, you can create as many menus as you want. on those you can put pages from your site, posts, and you can order it as you want. These aren't always automatic. You can make them automatically add new top level pages like you see this. But sometimes you've got to be careful because you might create a new page, but it might not necessarily be added to your menu, and you might actually have to go to menus and manually add that page to it. Underneath that, you've got plugins, which I think is fairly self-explanatory because plugins are obviously where all your plugins go. Here I've got a whole load, but usually when you first set up a WordPress site, you probably have 2 or 3 plugins. Usually it's something like Hello Dolly, Askomet, and if you don't, any that you don't need, you can obviously just delete them out or deactivate them. I've deactivated all these plugins for now, just so you can see the default menu here when you first go into create a WordPress site, because once I start activating some of these, it will start creating new menu items down here, which is obviously something you'll notice. So if I activate here contact form 7, you'll notice that then there's a new menu item appeared there called contact. Users is where you can set up new users for your site, so there'll always be one user in there, which is your admin user here, and you can start adding extra ones into that, and you can give them different roles such as subscriber, editor, and they will have different levels of access. Tools, again, this can depend largely on what plugins you've got installed, because it can add new tools into here. But generally you have an import and export tool where you can import and export parts of the WordPress database, and they can be very useful. Settings, you may need to go in here a bit and set a few things up. So this is where you'll set your site title up. This is important to set that because it's very good for SEO. Your tagline, which I think usually just shows up on the home page on the title area, and then you've got various other things in here like your WordPress address URL. So if you decide to use an SSL certificate and you want to change it to HTTPS, you'll need to make changes here, and the general email address set up for your site, and various other little bits and pieces, fairly self-explanatory. If we go to the writing area here, then you've just got some more areas which you can configure. So your default post category uncategorized, so that if you've got a news site, you might actually want that to be like latest news or something like that, and various other bits which again are fairly self-explanatory. Here under reading, this is quite important when you first set up a site, because if your site is not necessarily a blogging site, then you might want to set your homepage to be a static page on your site. In this case, it's portfolio, and the post page is getting assigned to blog. If you are a blogging site, then you might just want to keep that as your latest post. And this will say how many posts will show up on a page at a time. So hopefully, as long as you've got pagination set up correctly, this will show, if you've got 20 posts, it'll show 10 posts, and then you'll have links to go to the next page to show the next 10. And you can obviously just put this up or down. And these are showing things like summaries. So if you've got a list of blogs posts, you can show little snippets of what's on that blog, and then you can go to read more, or you can get this set to show the full text in a list. But I would recommend keeping this as a summary, and then encouraging people to click off that list to go to the full blog post to read more. Discussions usually do with comments, and like I said before, you can usually, I think this is ticked, allow people to post comments on your articles, and you can untick this if you actually don't want people commenting on articles on your site, which is quite a useful thing to know. Media is where you can actually set the pixel widths and heights of certain the default media that goes in. So once you actually drop an image into your media library, which I mentioned earlier, it will then automatically create, you'll keep the original size of your image, but then it will also create 3 different sizes of that. So a large, a medium, and a thumbnail, as mentioned here. The thumbnail one will actually crop it to these exact dimensions, whereas these ones will usually keep the longest edge to one of these, if that makes sense. So if you have an image that is, I don't know, 500 by 200 pixels, then it'll be the part that's 500 pixels that gets shrunk here down to 300 pixels, and that bit will be proportionate to that, if that makes sense. And then you have permalinks, which is useful to understand because this is how it affects how your URL is actually constructed. So up here, so you can actually have it showing the month and name of the post date, the post name. You can just see they basically give a bit of a description of these in here, and also if you've made any major changes to your site, sometimes you want to go in and save your permalinks to just refresh everything and make sure any changes show up. So you'll probably learn more about that as you get more into WordPress. Privacy, I think this is something relatively new. I only noticed this recently, where we actually help you create a privacy page and it will insert certain data regarding your site into it. And this is very, very useful now with all this new GDPR stuff that's been introduced by the European Union. So you can actually use this to assist you in creating a privacy policy page. And basically, that's it for a short introduction into the WordPress admin area, and hopefully that'll be of some help.